Welcome to The Hidden Truth. We're still pretty new to YouTube, and we're looking to expand our channel. If you enjoy our videos, please consider sharing them on social media or other UFO communities. Your support means everything to us. We have an exciting announcement. We'll be doing a monthly giveaway. All you have to do is like and comment on our videos for the chance to win a variety of prizes, including hats, shirts, and more. The more you like and comment, the greater your chances. Oh, and subscribing doesn't hurt either. What are you waiting for? Smash that like button. You can get free stuff.
1965. A man from California gets a ride in a UFO. The year was 1965. The place near San Francisco, California. The witness had the opportunity to board a landed UFO and went for a ride while conversing with the aliens on board. The case of Sid Patrick, which took place in California 4 months after the Atlas missile incident, deserves our attention, not least because the witness was asked by the Air Force not to discuss certain details. On January 30th, 1965, at about 2 a.m., radio, TV technician Sid Patrick, 45 years old at the time, encountered a landed UFO near his home at Manresa Beach, near Watsonville, 75 miles south of San Francisco. He saw the shadowy outline of an unlit craft, some 70 feet in diameter and 30 feet high, like two real thick saucers inverted, approach him and come to rest just above the ground. He panicked, began to run, and then heard a voice coming from the craft. "Do not be frightened. We are not hostile," it said. Patrick ran further. The voice repeated the phrase, then added, "We mean you no harm," and invited him on board. As he cautiously approached the craft, a door opened and he went inside, finding himself in a small compartment, about 6 by 7 feet. Another door slid open, and he entered, to be met by a man. The aliens. He was no different than me in basic appearance, had clean-cut features, and wore a type of flying suit that covered the body fully, said Patrick. On board were another 7 men, similar in appearance, and 1 woman, described as extremely pretty. They were all about 5 feet 8 inches to 5 feet 9 inches tall. By our own standards, I would say they all looked between 20 and 25 years old, very young, pert, energetic, and intelligent looking. Their features were similar to ours. There was only one feature I noticed that would differ from us greatly, and that was that their faces came to a point, much more than ours. They had sharp chins and noses. Their skin was somewhat of an Armenian color. Their eyes were all very dark. There was nothing unusual about them, their brightness, depth, or luminescence. All the men appeared to have very short auburn hair, but it looked as though it had never been cut. It looked like a natural growth. The lady had long hair and it was pushed down inside her clothing. Their fingers were a little longer than mine. The hands were very clean. The fingernails looked as if somebody had just given them a manicure. All of them were wearing 2-piece suits, slip-on type, light bluish-white in color. They had no buttons or zippers that I could see. The bottom section actually included the shoes. It looked like boots, which continued on up to the waistline, without any break around the ankles, just like a child's snowsuit. There was a large band in the middle, and large cuffs, and a large collar that came down with a V-neck. The collar had a very pretty design on it, and the neck piece, right around the neck, had a braid of some kind on it. They had soles and heels. I could hear them walking on the rubbery-like floor. The first man Patrick saw acted as spokesman, explaining that he was the only one on board who spoke English. He had no accent whatsoever. It was just as plain and just as perfectly spoken English as anyone has ever spoken on this earth. I believe they can adapt themselves to whatever condition they are working under. Every question I asked him, he would pause for about 25 or 30 seconds before he would answer, regardless of how minor it was. Perhaps he was getting instructions mentally in what response to give. I think if the crew communicated with each other, it was through mental telepathy, because I could see nothing that would indicate communication otherwise. inside the craft. Each of the rooms that was occupied had instrument panels on the walls, with the crew members concentrating on the instruments. They merely glanced around at me when I entered their room, then turned back to their work, as if they were unconcerned, said Patrick. Some rooms had 4 or 5 instruments, others had 15 or 20, but they were of a similar type in each room. They were nothing like ours. I didn't get close to any of the walls that had the movable instruments on them, because when I started to advance in that first room, he held out his hand for me not to advance, and I didn't either. He didn't say why, and I didn't ask. I saw markings on some of the instruments. Something like a tape moving along, with little tiny dots and dashes on it, like our teletype tapes, except they were going from left to right. I wouldn't classify it as a code, like our CW, continuous wave. There were no screens, such as our oscilloscopes. They had meters, but I could not see dials on them. He said they lit up only when in use. Patrick was shown an oblong lens, which he took to be part of a viewing system with a magnified, 3-dimensional effect. On it he saw an object, which he was told was a navigation craft, that looked like a blimp. This was 2:45 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and the object was in sunlight, so it had to be pretty far out. I imagine 1,000 miles out, or better. I didn't see any markings or portholes in it. He told me that the power source of the craft he was in was transferred to them from the other craft, and that it did all the navigation and manipulation through space. He told me they don't measure time and distance, as we know it, but rather in terms of light. When I asked him how fast they traveled through space, he answered that their speed was limited only by the speed at which they could transfer their energy source outside the craft. After a while, the spaceman told Patrick that they had traveled some distance and were now parked in a deserted area, which on subsequent investigation turned out to be near Leggett, California, 175 miles northwest of Watsonville. After we had landed on the hillside, he told me to step out so that I could come back to the place later to know this was real and not dreamed. I stepped out alone and walked around the outside of the ship. I felt the hull. It seemed very hard, but not metallic. I never felt anything like it before. The closest thing to it I ever felt on this earth would be a windshield, plexiglass. It had a very fine finish, a highly polished finish. He didn't tell me that touching this craft would do me harm, and I had no bad effects from it, none whatever. I was outside for not more than 3 minutes. I got down and looked at the legs it was on, and I tried to find markings on it. I didn't find a mark on it, and a place. Origin and purpose. Patrick asked where the craft and its people came from, and received a somewhat cryptic reply. He told me they were from a planet, and back of a planet, which we observe, but we do not observe them. He did not say we couldn't observe them. He merely said we didn't observe them. I think their planet is in our solar system. Patrick was shown a photo of a city on the visitor's planet. Every building in that picture was rounded off, half-moon shaped. I saw windows in the buildings. I cannot say the picture looked like anything I had ever seen before, because the buildings were spaced differently, offset from each other. It looked like they put one about 50 feet from another, and the next one 150 feet. There appeared to be roads in the distance, and there was foliage in the foreground, trees and bush too. The spaceman described his utopian society to Patrick. As you know it, we have no sickness, we have no crimes, we have no police force. We have no schools. Our young are taught at an early age to do a job, which they do very well. Because of our long life expectancy, we have a very strict birth control. We have no money. We live as one. Patrick asked what the purpose of the visit was. The man replied, observation only. Patrick explained, I don't think it meant for them to observe us. I think it was for me to observe them, because he did not ask me at any time my name, my age, how many teeth I had, how many members of my family. He didn't ask me one thing about myself. and this leads me to believe that they know about us already, and he came for us, to observe them. They did say they would come for further observations. I think they are observing people mostly. There was no mention of earthquakes, fault lines, or of anything government-wise, or political-wise, or anything that would affect our future, except that they gave me the impression that they will pick up more people in future. A spiritual experience. Sid Patrick was taken into what was referred to by the visitors as a consultation room. The color effect in this room defied description. Would you like to pay your respects to the supreme deity? He was asked. When he said that, I almost fainted. I didn't even know how to accept it. I said to him, we have one, but we call it God. Are we talking about the same thing? He replied, there is only one. So I knelt and did my usual prayer. Until that night, I had never felt the presence of the Supreme Being, but I did feel him that night. It's obvious that they are on a very high scientific level, but their relation with the Supreme Being means a lot more to them than their technical and scientific ability and knowledge. I would say that their religion and their science are all in one. Patrick was taken back to where he had been picked up 2 hours earlier, then stepped out of the craft and walked home. The Air Force investigation. Sid Patrick reported his experience to the Air Force and was grilled for 3 hours by a team headed by Major D.B. Reeder of Hamilton Air Force Base. They tried to frighten me. They said, Mr. Patrick, you are a real lucky person. These craft that come down here are real hostile, and you had no business even approaching them. I disagreed with them, because when this craft came down, they did not want to frighten me. They did not tell me to go aboard their craft. They invited me aboard. The Air Force told Patrick that there have been 2 instances where hostility had been involved. One the Mantle case, and the other an incident when an aircraft completely vanished from a radar screen. But the Air Force did tell Patrick that there was more than one group of UFOs visiting Earth, and that there were friendly, as well as hostile craft from more than one source. There were certain details the Air Force, asked me not to talk about publicly, but I think in telling it, that everything should be disclosed. I can see no reason for anything being held back. They didn't want me to say that the space people had no money. Under a barrage of cross-questioning by civilian investigators at the time, his answers were always clear, precise, and without guile, and he was always quick to appreciate the humorous aspects of the incredible situation he found himself in. Resources above top secret. Timothy Good, 1988. My take. Pretty detailed story to be a hoax. Not sure what the point would be. This is an excellent story. If it had happened to me, I would have had tons more questions.